Mr. Bodnar, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
While leaving behind 2 months in the Russia-Ukraine war, do you have any observation that the war may end soon? So when do you think the war will end?
I will be happy that this war wouldn't start at all. So we couldn't make a prediction. We just work for the victory. And what we can do, we are doing from here, and all our embassies from around the globe are trying to assist Ukraine in most possible way. So we are on the 3rd month of war, and first of all, we show to the world, we show to Russians, and we show to ourselves that we could resist and we are strong enough to withstand their attacks. Secondly, Ukrainian people mobilized, assist each other, and trying to help as much as possible, and not only in the country but also around the globe. So it means that Ukrainians are united as never before. Third dimension, the world is also united around Ukraine in majority, and supporting Ukraine starting from moral and political dimension, ending to humanitarian assistance and supply of weapons. Because we believe that we could finish a war, but we don't know what the plan Russians has. So we would prefer to finish this war on the negotiation table, and during the talks in Istanbul there was some progress which give us a glimmer of hope that the war will be over soon. But nevertheless, Russians continue attacks, Russians continue to conduct hostilities, Russians continue to use their missiles to strike peaceful cities. They already killed more than 219 kids. They killed thousands of Ukrainian civilians, and they destroyed a number of cities. So they are continuing this war with some aim which we actually don't understand, because their progress is very small, their achievements are very few, and only they are losing equipment and military power, and also killing our people. So our proposal is very simple: stop the bloodshed, withdraw forces, and let's renew negotiations. Because of that, we believe that the war will be over sooner than Ukrainian army could be stronger. Because otherwise, Russia will continue their attacks and try to penetrate to Ukrainian territory more and to capture more Ukrainian territories. Because they don't care about people, they don't care about our people, they don't care about their people, they're just fighting for the land. And that is the worst scenario in this war, for capturing land and for taking more control over Ukrainian territory. It's not according to our plans as well, and we will resist up until the end of occupation of our territories.
Yesterday there were 2 attacks on Kiev. And did Russia hit a strategic target in Kiev, or is Russia re-entering Kiev?
Russia couldn't re-enter Kiev because they were pulled back and withdraw their forces almost a month ago. What we have seen around Kiev, there was huge atrocities which we'd never seen before from the maybe World War II, and it showed how criminal sense of Russian war is, and how what criminal orders have been given to the soldiers, with all these rapes, destructions, killing civilians, looting personal belongings, etc. So if you will look today what they sent to Russia, and how the families of soldiers are receiving it with pleasure, it shows that Russian people are supporting this war, not only from the political point of view, but also from the material point of view. That's the very terrible situation, and show how different is attitude to the war. So yesterday there was a very dangerous attacks on civilian infrastructure and strategic infrastructure. There was one residential building hit, there was some enterprises hit, but there was some kind of symbolic attack, because at this period of time there was a visit of Secretary General of United Nations, Mr. Guterres, and Prime Minister of Bulgaria to Kiev. And it showed that the Russians are not taking any responsibility for the international community leaders, and they are just hating anyone who is trying to find the way to peace. So before that, UN Secretary General had been visiting Moscow. Before that, he was visiting Ankara, and all the discussions was dedicated to the creating of humanitarian possibilities to evacuate people from Mariupol. And the answer from Russian side was simple: just attack. Who knows where these missiles could hit? Delegations or only civilian and strategic infrastructure. So that's why they show that there is no secure place in Ukraine and they could reach any possible destination. So according to our information, they have already used more than 2,000 missiles of long range distance and attacked different objects, including civilian infrastructure, in the center of the city. I mean, now in Kiev. But they also shooting different cities or shelling different cities around Ukraine, including western ones. And as well, they continue to shell the cities which are very close to the nowadays front line, like Kharkiv, Mykolaiv, cities and towns in Zaporizhia Oblast, in Dnipro Oblast, in Donetsk and Lugansk Oblast. So they continue to hit civilian infrastructure with no mercy. And what they are also doing in the criminal activities, it's just bombing the Azovstal factory, where a number of civilians, wounded civilians and soldiers are hiding themselves, and they continue these attacks despite the statement that they will stop attacks and withdraw forces just to keep it alone. So it means that we couldn't trust Russians, and that also lead to the understanding that negotiations should be done not only between two sides, but also with engagement of a representative of the international community, including Turkey.
At this point, I would like to ask, have Russia withdrawn from the Kiev tactically or because it's failed?
It's failed. First of all, they didn't capture Kiev. That was the main target of the attack. All these towns that were under their occupation show how they treated civilians and how they behave in a very cruel way. And they just stuck in these small towns around Kiev. They were step by step destroyed. Their forces, their lines of supplies, their morale was decreasing, and Russians finally understood that they couldn't disperse so much forces. They withdraw them. They relaunch their possibilities. They implement some kind of measures to strengthen their fighting power and brought them to Donbass. So now the same forces have been seen both in Mariupol and on the direction of Izum, where they are trying to continue their attacks. Some of them have been already destroyed. Some of them are, let's say, sheltered, and some one of them are continuing to try to penetrate to further on in Ukrainian territory. But still, it is the military failure, and they will never recognize it. But as the whole war is their military failure, because they didn't get anything they need to or want to. The same is with the Battle of Kiev or battle about Chernihiv, Sumy, and other towns and cities which withstand their attacks and does not allow Russians to enter the big cities. So that was our tactical victory, and it also showed that Russian army is not so strong as they presented them.
As you said, Russia is focused on capturing the Donbass region, downsizing its goals in Ukraine territory. And what do you think Russia can do to avoid failing a second time? For example, is there a possibility of using nuclear weapons?
It still remains theoretical, because to use nuclear weapons against a nuclear state, it is not even foreseen in the military doctrine of Russian Federation. So it's still more theoretical, but we are thinking in normal logic. As a normal country, civilized country which has its tradition, and we obey the international law and the law of war and the habits of war, but Russians did not. So we still didn't know what Putin has in mind. They have a tactical nuclear weapon which could be used, but according to the Russian doctrine, it could be used only in some specific situation which hurts the Russian territory or Russian something. So they have specific possibilities which is foreseen in their military doctrine. So still I'm not aware, I do not believe that they will be so crazy to use it, because otherwise the international community should react more harshly and still we didn't know what will be the response, and they also didn't know what will be the response, because using nuclear weapons, it's switched the way to the Third World War, and they should understand it properly well. Despite even these military activities, they are also showing that Russia is trying to repeat what was going on during World War II. And even if you look at their will to celebrate this Victory Day on the 9th of May, their slogan is not like in Europe. Europe said never again. They are saying we could repeat. And they are repeating now the situation of World War II in Ukraine, trying to repeat, as they said, their victories. But they have no victories, they have only losers. And that is also our achievement, and support of international community bring results that Russian military machines will not get any victories at all.
Mm-hmm. I would like to ask you about the concerns that the war may escalate. You know, there was an attack in Transnistria, Moldova, and this attack raised concerns that the war could spread beyond the Russian-Ukrainian borders. Do you think the war will spread to different geographies?
It's already split to different geographies. Because if you will see that, first of all, Belarusian territory, Russia uses it widely for military attacks, for military aircraft attacks, for missile attacks, for their forces which entered to Kiev. They entered from Belarusian territory, to Chernihiv city, to Sumy. So it was all from Belarusian territory. It means Russia used Belarus, and most probably it was a plan to use Belarusian military forces to attack Ukraine from the north. So Belarus, de facto, is in war. The other side of the story is the plan about Transnistria, because they have some detachments of Russian military forces there. And as we could imagine, and we have some intelligence about the plans, they have a plan to occupy the territories around Mykolaiv and try to penetrate to Odessa and start a landing offensive operation with engagement of Transnistria and sea land operation. But first of all, they didn't manage to penetrate to Mykolaiv, because Mykolaiv is defending, and these territories are not, so we didn't allow them to enter closely to Odessa. Secondly, they have lost a number of Marines in Mariupol instead of attacking Odessa from the sea. And now, most probably, they are trying to engage their forces in Transnistria for really attracting our attention. Because if it was our interest to do something with Transnistria, it would be happening in the first days of war. We do not need any additional fronts, and that is neither our interest nor our attempt to make something on the territory of Moldova, because we consider that Transnistria is the territory of Moldova, and Moldova have a right to turn it back under their control. There was a negotiation process. Ukraine was and still is formally the guarantor of this negotiation process of Transnistria settlement. And we have no intention to interfere into Moldova affairs. But Russians, they do not preserve any rules, any bilateral documents which they sign with Moldova, and they are trying now to escalate situation, to mobilize locals, and to create additional threat to Ukraine. It is not about Moldova. And if you look at their statements, or the statements of the Russian side, they said that they had a plan also to attack to the territory of Transnistria and join it together with other territories they occupied in Ukraine. So it's clear vision of Russian aggressive machine to occupy more territories and to control this south of Ukraine. And the main aim most probably is to cut Ukraine from the sea. So that's their target, and that is why they're escalating situation in Transnistria. And all this video we have seen and all this blow up, it's a clear provocation, which Russia is doing very well, because they are well trained for this type of activities, and especially provoking other sides to react on that. So that is only their attempts. But we will see if they will start any attacks from the Transnistrian territory. For sure, they will have no successes from this territory because of the number of forces, and what they have there. It's nothing in comparison with the Ukrainian army.
Are you in contact with Zelenskiy? Have you talked to him recently?
No, I'm in conversation with his team. So we're working closely with the Office of President, with Ministry of Foreign Affairs, with other ministries, and communicating. And we're also having some kind of VTC meetings, also with participation of President, government, and so it is fully controlled and coordinated by the President. All the efforts to strengthen our ability to resist and to provide all necessary humanitarian assistance for Ukraine in this terrible period of time. Even more, we now start to work with the government on organizing bilateral visits. Just recently, we have Minister of Economy and First Vice Prime Minister, Mrs. Sveredenko. She came to Istanbul. She met with the Minister of Trade of Turkey and also communicated with the Turkish business who has interest in cooperating with Ukraine. Because as you know, that we have many practical things to do together, starting from food security, ending to different projects, including future restoration of Ukraine.
Have Turkey's diplomatic context increased the possibility of a potential Putin-Zelenskiy meeting?
It is not about Putin-Zelenskiy, it's about peace. So Turkey facilitates hugely and do maybe the biggest work in bringing two sides together. It is highly appreciated, and it is said by President, by our Minister, and all the relevant authorities. And I also praise these efforts, because you know that first there was a meeting between three ministers in Antalya with assistance of Minister Çavuşoğlu. Then we have meeting of a negotiating team with assistance of Turkish side and with participation of President Erdogan at the beginning. But after the Istanbul talks, we feel that there is a lack of will from the Russian side to continue these negotiations and to achieve any tangible results, because as I understand, they would like to continue these warfare and take more territories, and then from the positions of as they believe winner, to dictate us conditions for the terms of this agreement which we could reach. But our position is very clear, that we should have not only bilateral agreement on the ceasefire and the withdrawal of forces, but also some kind of international agreement on guarantees, because we need to have a secure situation in future, and that Russia will not repeat it once again, as they pretend to do it in many other places. That's one thing. The second thing, which we should be aware, all of us, that this evil should be punished. So Russia have conducted many criminal acts around the globe, starting from Syria, Libya, in Georgia, in Moldova, on the territory of Russia by itself, and these evil activities have not been punished. So we should work closely also not only on the settlement of peace accords and guarantees to Ukraine, but also on bringing Russia to responsibility. And if world will be strong enough in their will to punish this evil and to bring Russians to accountability, it will stop the escalation of conflict. If the world will be weak and just would like to appease the aggressor, that will be the big mistake which could lead to the Third World War. Or even I could say that the war in Ukraine, which Russia waged against us, it's the beginning of most probably further escalation of conflict. Because Russia is not giving any aggressive attempt and saying publicly that the next targets will be the Baltic states, will be Poland, and most probably Turkey. And we should be cautious about that. Because their aggressive machine it's also galvanized the society. We see now that 75% of Russian population is supporting this war. It's really terrible. If you will listen to the interceptions which our security forces are taking from the phone conversation between soldiers and families, it seems that families are very happy that their soldiers are in Ukraine. They are happy that they are killing kids and women, and they are happy about the lootings they have been given or they are doing in Ukraine. So it's some kind of, I would say most probably it's like pandemic of war, pandemic of evil moods in Russian society, which should also be decreased. And this mood should be done only, these changes should be done only through de-Putinization of Russia, like it was with Nazi Germany in 1945.
Do you think that Turkey is neutral in its diplomatic contacts?
I wouldn't say it's neutral, because from the first days of war, Turkey clearly declared that they are against this aggression. They are not supporting these military activities of Russia on our territory, and they are against the killing of civilians and destruction of infrastructure. It was a clear statement from the Turkish authorities, Turkish president, Turkish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and later condemnations of the atrocities that happened to be known from media is also showed that the Turkish side understands correctly who is aggressor and who is victim of the aggression. Moreover, if you look at the surveys which was conducted in the Turkish society, it also clearly shows that Turkish society does not also support this criminal activities of Russians on the territory of Ukraine, and this war is not popular in Turkey as well. More than 78% are against this. As well, if you would look at the scale of assistance which was provided to Ukraine, I mean humanitarian assistance, receiving our kids, receiving our people who left the country, it also shows that Turkey, I believe that Turkey is on our side, mentally and politically. But mediation efforts could create the picture that Turkey tried to create the image of neutrality. But it's neutrality with the benefits on our side. But it's not the neutrality in the understanding we do not care about that, because majority of Turkish people are taking care about Ukrainians. They're really feeling this sorrow and pain of our people. And even if you will come to the streets and speak to ordinary people, they every time saying that we are really sorry about what's happening. So the feelings are not divided. That means not neutrality. The feelings are on our side.
You know, Turkey is a country that has warm relations with Russia. Does this cause discomfort for Ukraine?
From the very beginning of war, in 2014, we have clear distinctions between Ukrainian-Turkish strategic partnership and Russian-Turkish relationship. I wouldn't say it's warm relations. It's more pragmatic. So we try. Actually, we were not happy with the projects which have been implemented here between Turkey and Russia, but we are trying not to overlap these two directions. So we work on strengthening of our ties and bringing as much positive and constructive approaches to our bilateral relations or to our strategic partnership. Existing level of communication between Turkey and Russia allows now to organize these negotiations and talks, and it helps to some extent mediation. But it also doesn't give excuse for the strengthening of cooperation between Russia and Turkey. We are saying it openly that every dollar and every euro which is paid to Russia, it goes to the war. So we ask Turkish communities, Turkish society, Turkish business not to widen their cooperation with Russia, because in this way you are supporting the war. So, but we are not criticizing these activities, because we understand it is also the interest of Turkey, and Turkish companies, Turkish businessmen, or even authorities, they have their interests, and we respect them. But our position is strong and clear, and we are not hiding ourselves in expressing our views. And every time when I have official meetings, I'm trying to convince my counterparts, then don't do this, don't do that, but the decision which will be adopted, we respect, because that's the decision of Turkish side. So we are not in the position to criticize or to put press on something. We're just asking. And we are happy with those level of cooperation we have. And our main intention is to strengthen our cooperation and showing advantages of our bilateral track in comparison with the work with Russia. So if companies are working with Russia, they will lose their prestige in the world. They could also meet the secondary sanctions. They couldn't have possibility to work on the Ukrainian market. And we are now planning to launch the big project of reconstruction of Ukraine. And there is so many work that will be enough for every Turkish company which would like to implement these projects in the infrastructure in different other areas. So we are trying to encourage and engage, but not to press and demand or create a criticism. It's the other ways of cooperation.
Do you think Turkey should impose economic sanctions on Russia?
Yes, and we say it from the first day of war. We would be happy if Turkey will implement sanctions, but once again, it's up to the decision of Turkish side what to do and how to do, because Turkey has, as a sovereign state, it has their own interest. And what Turkey already did, it also helps to prevent Russia from further escalation or strong pressure on us, like closing straits does not allow some Russian ships to come to the Black Sea and attack our cities, supposedly mentioned. Turkey forbidden flights to Syria, and we know that from Syria there were Assad soldiers who have been willing to participate in war against Ukraine. That's also a positive signal. And many other things which will be maybe known after the war, but still we are working closely and trying to convince, but not to press.
What is the role of the Turkish-made armored drone Bayraktars in the war?
You know, the Bayraktars, it's the machinery, yes, it's a technique. We bought it and it's sound. Ukraine use it widely. It helps to defend our soil, but we are also using a number of other equipment, which is also helping to defend Ukraine and to withstand with Russian aggression. And if to look at the figures, still the main supplier for Ukrainian armed forces are Russian forces, because they are leaving a lot of military equipment. They lost a lot of military equipment, which is being repaired or restored by Ukrainian forces and are using as well. So we are very happy that we have this equipment. Bayraktar really play considerable role in precise targeting of Russian forces, and you know that it became very popular in Ukraine, like calling something Bayraktar, and so now everybody knows about Bayraktar, even singing songs about that. So. But maybe after the war, we will estimate the real impact of this equipment, what kind of technique and what the impact was in de facto, because now it's also huge, mostly in the media and well known in the media from the media, but real results will be seen after the war, when we could disclose the information, which is now remain secret.
When the war started, it was said that NATO took action to protect Ukraine's territorial integrity. On the other hand, it was said that this war was or would turn into a war between NATO and Russia. Do you think what is happening in Ukraine right now is not NATO-Russia war? So.
It's completely untrue, because it had nothing to do neither with NATO nor with the West. NATO is respecting territorial integrity of Ukraine, but NATO has no obligations to Ukraine. And that is purely Russian narrative, that Russia is fighting against NATO in Ukraine. That's, sorry, but it's fully untrue. It's just a propaganda tool which is used to justify why they attacked Ukraine. So the real aim of Russia is to subjugate Ukraine, to control our territory and to control our people. Because from the history they know that without Ukraine, Russia has never will be empire or superpower. It is now a decreasing force which is trying to renew its supremacy by this military activities on our territory and this war against Ukrainian people. NATO, from the very beginning, said that they will not fighting with Russians. And having no obligations towards Ukraine, because they have only one obligation, 2008, to accept Ukraine to NATO. That was their fault, that they didn't implement this idea, because if Ukraine could become a NATO member after 2008, there will be no war in Georgia, no war in Ukraine, Russia will never fight against NATO. they will be maybe more cooperative and more peaceful in behavior around the globe. But West had made a mistake, a very big mistake, creating a gray zone of security, which include Belarus, Ukraine, Moldova, South Caucasus states, and it allowed Russians to wage their hybrid and military activities, which actually is now seen as the open Russian-Ukrainian war. The other side of the story is that nowadays only, the Western country understood that this aggressive policy of Russia could be stopped in Ukraine if Ukrainians continue to resist. That's the other side of the story, and we as an independent state have the right to ask any partners to supply us with weapons, with humanitarian assistance, with anything possible. And we are using our right, which is foreseen in the UN Charter for Self-Defense. And all UN members have a right to supply us in our self-defense forces with military equipment and with necessary materials for defense, for self-defense. It's not about aggression. From the other side, all other countries have a right and possibility to use peaceful means of influence on Russia, like sanctions, like limiting of flights, like creating uncomfortable conditions for their business and money, to stop this aggression. Because it is purely unprovoked and unjustified war, which has a name to subrogate the other country against any rules of international law, against any UN provisions, and against any habits, any traditional, how it's called correctly, any traditions which exist in this region for communicating between countries. So in 21st century, to behave like 19th century country is not acceptable for anyone, because other countries are also afraid about that. That is why the support of Ukraine is now only increasing, and our defense capabilities are only increasing. And we will be defending our soil to the end when the Russian forces, the last Russian soldier, will leave the territory of Ukraine. That is the key point which we need to understand.
There have been statements that Ukraine will remain neutral, but if the war ends, is there any possibility that Ukraine will also be a part of NATO?
Yes, we still have formal procedures which envisage that Ukraine is planning to join NATO. So it is foreseen in the constitution, and to change this provision, you need first of all to have voting in the parliament, and secondly, you should look at the public opinion. So if you look at today's polls, 72% of Ukrainians are supporting NATO bid, to join NATO. Why? Just to be secure. If we are in NATO, most probably, I say most probably, Russia will not continue these attacks, and after the war, it will be a safeguard for us. It's the best way. But the other side of the story is NATO by itself. Still, even despite of our suffering and casualties, NATO countries do not have unanimity about Ukrainian future membership. That's the problem. It's not a problem with us, but problem with countries within the NATO, and they still resist accepting Ukraine to NATO, despite today Ukraine is defending NATO, not NATO defending Ukraine. Because otherwise, if Ukraine failed, NATO country will be the target. And I don't believe that Russia will stop. And that is also a test for NATO. If, for example, Latvia or Estonia will be attacked, all NATO countries will come to help? I still doubt. Because it's a formal obligation of NATO countries to assist each other. But will it be implemented or not? It's still the big question. So that is the two sides of the story. The neutrality status, which we propose as the way to stop this war, it's the other side of the story with the same substance. We requested guarantees which have the scale and power the same as Article 5 for NATO countries. And we engage as many countries as possible, which could include P5, it's permanent members of the UN Security Council. We propose to Turkey, to Germany, to other countries to be among guarantors. And we mean that in case of future war could happen and Russia would like to continue or to restart the aggression, all guarantor states should defend Ukraine. Clear as Article 5. The scale and the methods and the deep substance of this should be discussed between negotiating teams. And we have direct communication between relevant authorities. They will discuss it, they will understand what we mean, what other countries means, and we will find a common ground on that. And after that, it will be the general agreement on these guarantees, which will be physical but not paper one. Because if you remember, in 1994, we have give up our nuclear weapons, which was the third most powerful nuclear potential in the world, for the paper guarantees or assurances that it's now some countries said, and it leads to nothing. So this paper remain a paper and bring no judicial or physical assistance to Ukraine on the ground of this Budapest memorandum. So we wouldn't like to repeat our mistakes from the previous time. Now we need strong guarantees, which will provide us with physical assistance. It means starting from sanctions, delivering weapons, and into the military forces should be deployed on our territory. It's our request. And the thing which we should understand that today, formally, Ukraine is a neutral state. We have no obligations neither to NATO nor to EU with the understanding of our military political status. It means that we have been attacked as a neutral country in 2014, and we are still remaining formally a neutral country.
Mr. Bodnar, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. Sorry for bothering you with so many details.